The year is 1980. Lusaka has been gripped with fear. A serial killer is on the loose. 29 innocent women are about to lose their lives prematurely. What led him to commit such heinous crimes? Here is the story of the Lusaka Strangler. On the 5th of January 1980, residents of Lusaka woke up to a rude awakening. A lifeless body of a young woman was discovered laying behind the Lusaka boys' primary school. When police rushed to the scene, they conducted some preliminary investigations and discovered that the woman had been strangled to death. It appeared she was murdered in another location, and her body was just dumped on the crime scene. Further investigations revealed that the woman's name was Grace Shambilu, aged 21. The following day, on January 6th, people discovered another body of a woman lying along a footpath in Kamwala trading area. She had been raped and strangled to death. Unfortunately, till this date, the identity of this woman still remains unknown, but she was approximated to be in her mid-20s. On January 12, 1980, students of National Institute of Public Administration discovered the body of Florence Malima lying behind the campus. She had been raped and strangled to death. 2 days later, on January 14th, young Priscilla, aged 10, was sent by her parents to go and buy groceries at a nearby store. She did not return. Hours and hours went by, and still Priscilla was nowhere to be seen. Her parents became anxious, as Priscilla had been sent to that same grocery stores countless times, and she had never delayed in returning home. Fearing for the worst, they decided to start looking for her. They checked at all her friends' places in the neighborhood, and she was not there. As nightfall was approaching, it was a horrific discovery. Her body was laying in a maize field between Olympia and Northmead. She had equally been strangled to death. At this point, the community was gripped with so much fear. Who was committing these murders was the question that was lingering in everyone's mind. People started locking themselves inside their homes. On the 28th of January, the body of a young policewoman was discovered lying dead between the University of Zambia and the showgrounds. Her name was Regina Munanga, and she was only 25 years old. She was raped and strangled to death. Her killer took her ID and placed it on top of her body before fleeing the scene. 2 days later, on January 30th, 21-year-old Claudia Mayimbolwa was strangled to death, and her body was dumped near Nasser Road. According to eyewitnesses, she was last seen interacting with a soldier. 7 days would pass by before the killer would strike again. On February 7th, the body of 20-year-old Million Chipeta was discovered lying in a maize field between Lusaka City Airport and Long Acres. In the 1980s, this area was all covered by dense bushes. 4 days later, the body of Fostakela was discovered lying in a maize field between City Airport and Kalingalinga. She was only 10 years old. Her parents sent her to school, but she never returned home. When her body was discovered, she was still putting on a school uniform. What was even more shocking was the discovery of multiple boot prints at the crime scene. On the 17th of February, the body of another young woman was discovered behind a football field near a named hotel. Upon investigations, she was identified as 26-year-old Grace Matondo, who was a guest at the hotel. The authorities were racing with time to find this elusive serial killer who had caused so much havoc, but to no avail. As the body count kept on rising, there was panic within the police force. No one knew who the killer was or where he would strike next. On February 17th, Frieden Cube, aged 32, was murdered, and her body was dumped near Liberla Primary School. On March 13th, another body of a woman was discovered behind Kamwala Secondary School. She was later identified as 18-year-old Jane Malako. On the same day, along a footpath in Kabwata, the body of Hildur Banda was discovered. At this point, the body count had risen to 15, and there was panic amongst the police to find this elusive serial killer. President Konda declared a curfew and ordered intensive patrols in Lusaka. Meanwhile, as the body count kept rising, it became clear that there was a serial killer on the loose. On the 25th of March, the body of Miriam Chawala was discovered dumped near Dooley Motors. On the 4th of April, another body of 21-year-old Maggie Mwanza was discovered. On the April 7th, the body of Regina Mumba was discovered. She was strangled to death. On the 4th of May, a body of unidentified woman was picked up at the entrance of Woodlands Stadium. After the rape and murder of Clara Sidambiko on the 14th of May, the killings reduced, and there would be no killings for over 20 days. The joy of the people was, however, short-lived. Rosemary, a milk trader who used to sell her merchandise from the Kamwala trading area, did not return home. Her body was discovered on the 10th of June near Namboard. She had very deep cut on her forehead. On the 16th of June, a young pregnant woman called Lita Mabango was stabbed to death in the chest 4 times. Her body was found hanging on a wall fence at the National Institute of Public Administration. As the body count was now standing at 23. 21-year-old Agnes Mwila fell victim on the 30th of June. She was murdered and raped. However, as luck would have it, on the evening of July 16th, a young woman traveling to see her parents in Makini arrived at the Kamwala bus terminus. She was soon approached by 2 soldiers, one wearing a combat uniform and the other in a green uniform. Later, the second soldier left, but the one wearing the combat uniform offered to escort the woman to Makini. Despite her declining the offer, the man picked up her basket containing her belongings, forcing her to follow him. After a while, the two reached a small path, and the man introduced himself as Lieutenant Kapalu. He proceeded to ask her if she could identify him in civilian clothes, to which she replied that she could. Upon hearing this, the soldier pushed her to the ground and started choking her. She managed to kick her attacker off of her, but he then hit her with a spanner. He then told her, "You are the only girl whom I have failed to kill. I have killed the rest, so you are the one who will cause me to be arrested." The attacker hit the woman again and fled the scene. 3 nearby security guards heard the woman's screams and rushed towards her while blowing their whistles. When they reached her, she was still screaming. They took her to a hotel, and she was later transferred to a police station for questioning before receiving a checkup at a local hospital. The woman and a detective who had seen them together earlier were able to provide a description of the attacker. A short man, light in complexion, putting on a military uniform. The suspect was heard speaking English and Nyanja with a Lozi accent. From this, investigators determined that the perpetrator was either a soldier or a man impersonating a soldier. After this incident, there were no murders to the end of July and the entire month of August. Peace was being restored in Lusaka, and people started getting back to their normal lives. Thirsty for blood, the serial killer would resume his killing spree again. On September 7th, a woman left her home in Chingola with her baby and traveled to Lusaka via bus. Along the journey, she became acquainted with a woman traveling to Chipata. After their bus had arrived in Lusaka, they decided to spend the night at the bus terminal, as there were no buses scheduled for either woman's destination until the next morning. A short time later, the women were greeted by 2 soldiers, who asked the women to show them their national registration cards, to which they obliged. The soldiers attempted to convince the women to spend the night with them at a guest house, but the women declined. However, one of the soldiers carried the Chipata woman's bags with him, so the woman followed him. That woman has never been identified, and it is unknown whether she is alive or another victim. Approximately 1 hour later, the other soldier returned and persuaded the other woman by telling her that her acquaintance was sleeping in the guest house. The woman reluctantly agreed and followed him. After 30 minutes of walking, they arrived at a narrow path. Out of nowhere, the soldier started strangling the woman with her baby still on her back. Thinking the woman was dead, the serial killer fled the scene, leaving the woman lying on the ground with her baby beside her. A few hours later, the woman woke up with her child crying next to her. Her national registration card had been taken out of her suitcase and placed on her head. The woman's wristwatch and wedding ring had also been stolen. She eventually got help after walking to a nearby house. 5 days later, on September 12th, another woman, Mary Chisanga, had escorted her boyfriend to Zambia railway station. It was the last time anyone had seen her alive. 2 days later, her dead body was discovered near To Fitness Center. She had been gruesomely murdered. Her intestines were protruding from her stomach and her body was mutilated. The serial killer's luck would soon run out. After the attack of the second surviving victim, the police were commanded to confront any soldier loitering at bus and railway stations. On September 16th, the second survivor, accompanied by plainclothes detectives, went back to the bus station she was lured from to see if her attacker was there. She was soon greeted by a man who said, "I happen to have seen you somewhere." The woman said that she had never met him before and that she had recently arrived from Chingola. The man then asked her to accompany him to a guest house, where he would book a room for her. To her shock, this man was wearing her wristwatch that had been stolen during her attack. Quickly she alerted the police who had accompanied her, which led to the man being arrested. Upon questioning the man, it was discovered that his name was Milton Sipolo, a soldier in the Zambia army. Milton was stationed at Kabwe military camp. The following day, the police searched his home and found items belonging to several of his victims. When confronted about the discovery, Sipolo falsely claimed the items were from a woman he fell in love with. However, he said that he no longer loved the woman after finding out that she had had an operation on her abdomen. The supposed woman took her child to the hospital, but left behind her luggage. 3 witnesses, including the 2 survivors, identified Sipolo as the strangler. When told this by the police, he said, "If they can pick me from the line of others, then I am the one who tried to kill them." That afternoon, Sipolo led officers to locations where he had murdered his victims. He also stated that he had an accomplice, a lance corporal. However, the corporal denied the accusations, and police found no evidence linking him to the murders, so he was released. On September 18, 1980, while being transferred to an interrogation room at the Lusaka Central Police Station, Sipolo escaped the hands of the officers escorting him and fled to the roof of the building, still handcuffed. Whilst on the rooftop, he quickly ran to the edge of the building and threatened to jump off should anyone come near him. Despite pleas from the police and fire brigade, Sipolo jumped off the roof in front of a crowd of people, killing himself. A photojournalist from the Times of Zambia captured his last moment jumping from the roof. Despite his evil killings, Milton Sipolo never faced trial for his heinous crimes. May the souls of his innocent victims continue resting in peace.